What is up, garden friends? Kevin Jordan here from Field Trippin', doing a little gardening today. Even though the weather's a little freaky, but I'm getting excited for the springtime weather and growing. And if you want to have a bountiful harvest, it's all about that soil. It's all about nutrition for your plants. And so in today's video, we're going to talk about vermicomposting, composting with red wiggler worms. You may have seen this on the internet before or researched yourself. Maybe you're doing this already. Many years ago, I bought some worms for our garden, for our class here, and we've 5 pounds, and those have now proliferated and they've multiplied like mad. So we have tons of them, maybe not a ton, but thousands of red wigglers. I'll show you here in a moment. We've done everything from the Rubbermaid bins and the plastic totes, super simple to do. So if you're thinking about doing it, there's many different ways and options that you can explore, from ones that are very cheap and simple, and those can be effective as well. We've had some success with those in the past, but we actually expanded ours. We made larger worm bins. We changed the material a little bit, used some recycled materials, which was really great. But we've had some success, and now that material is building up. Those worm castings are just going to make just tremendously valuable soil amendments for our garden. A ton of organic matter, a ton of fungi and bacteria that's kind of just in there inherently, but just the nutrition and the amount of organic matter that's in there is just phenomenal for your plants and your garden. And for us, we can throw away our kitchen waste. We have a culinary program, so garden scraps, all that go into it. Without further ado, let's get right into worm composting. Let's do it. So outside of our greenhouse out here, we have 3 bins that we built from old raised planters that we had, some redwood. We got some screws. We painted them white on the outside just to reflect some of that summer heat, because we want them nice and insulated. And the wood has been better for that, I've noticed, than the plastic. But let me just show you. So we're feeding them with tons of kitchen scraps, even some garden scraps. Now, these just got laid in here by a student. Of course, all your material, if you chop it up, blend it, make it into smaller pieces, it's really going to speed up the process. And one thing specifically you always want to break down, and like I said, some students just brought these in over from the kitchen yesterday. Eggshells. The worms love them. It's a great grit for them, but when they're whole like this, you can see a slug hanging out in there. When they're whole like this, they tend to just take forever to break down. So if you can grind these up, pulverize them as small as you possibly can, like doing this helps, but you're really actually going to want to do it, far finer than even what you can do with your hand. So the more you grind up your eggshells, it's fantastic. Of course, banana peels and coffee grounds are fantastic. And I want to show you this just to show you what our system looks like. So we've just old wood bins. We've actually wired in a irrigation system to this, because in the summer it gets a little dry in here, so we have some fogger misters that bring in some water. Thankfully right now we've had some rain, so that's actually keeping it nice and moist, because your worms want it extra moist. Of course, we soak cardboard and add that back to here. It's basically like an edible home for the worms. They can live in it, it keeps them cool, keeps them moist, and they'll end up just eating it, especially if it's soft enough. You can see here I've actually had some tubs, because eventually I was starting to harvest. I wanted to harvest some material, so I actually put just produce in my tubs, and then the worms have been working their way up. And so just to show you, we'll see how many worms we got in here. Oh yeah. So the worms are going crazy. We're getting some good castings. You can see right here basically what we're after. That's what we're after, is those beautiful little castings. Anything that's not edible, like plastic, tape and stuff, you'll see that gets left behind. Let's take a deeper look over here. So you can see it's starting to build up really heavily, and we've got a pretty good amount of worms in each bin. And you can see they're just going nuts right now, avocado peels and all that. We've had some onions come in here, and the worms kind of eat them, but honestly, I usually save these either for my green waste or my hot compost. We don't grow a ton of onions, but we do grow some, and we do use some in the kitchen, but the worms don't seem to love them as much as other things. And so you'll notice as you experiment with different mixes and materials, you can see even some old worksheets all soaked and ground up in here. Even the ink that's in that, it can actually be beneficial to their gizzards, to their digestion. So you always want some grit in there. You can grind up some volcanic rocks and pumice. That grit actually helps their digestion quite a bit. So here's another one where I was trying to get them in here, but you can see underneath them all the worms still coming up. And bam, look at that. Look at all those castings. So the brown gold, the black gold we're after is all that right there. And so you can still see some of the eggshells. Like I said, those would be better off getting pulverized really heavily. Sometimes I just don't have time to do it, but the more you can do that, the better. If they don't fully break down, you can sift them out, or eventually you can mix it into your soil. But to have them broken down more and more is just the best. So I'm going to show you our other system. So very similar. Just want to show you how how active. So you got all these banana peels. Now, sometimes we'll actually cover this all up with wet cardboard, and we have recently, but the worms actually ate their way through it just a few weeks back. You'd be so shocked at how fast they'll actually eat this wet cardboard. That's why I love getting these egg cartons where they're not the plastic, they're not the foam. I love the ones that biodegrade because I can just throw them right into my worm bin with some material, and the worms just go gaga for them. But look at these worms. Look at that. Just going nuts, and you can see all that material that's broken down. That's their waste, that's the castings, and that's what we're after. It's just so wonderful. We'll end up harvesting this. We can add it to our garden. We can mix it with water and make a worm tea that we can do a soil drench with it. It's just phenomenal. And you can see here's some little traps, some worm traps that we built because we wanted to get all the worms to get focused into one area. But the problem is the culinary kids are very helpful, but they'll just dump. They weren't going with me. I want them all right in there just for now. That way I can pull these out, and then I can dig up this material and actually harvest it. You probably notice sometimes harvesting the material takes a little bit of effort, but really if you get most of the worms to travel into a location, then it's a little easier. And you can sift them out. You can use light, you can use a screen, different methods, but really what you're after. And I've put no soil in here. There's never been any dirt added to this, only this material right here. So that turns into this. And that's just amazing way. Like I said, look at that, it's plastic tape. So the worms are very good, but they can't eat plastic. So those always get pulled out. If they get, sometimes the cardboard has that, but you can see the castings just piling up. This is the input, and that is the output. And that, I'm telling you, it is some of the best soil amendment you can get your hands on. I got my hands on it, and this is like, look how deep down it goes right now. It's just deep. And so it's time for us to harvest this. We'll get that. We'll kind of, like I said, we can dry it out a little bit, screen it out, get anything that's not good for our soil out of there, like this plastic. But for the most part, they're doing great. And here's our last one right here. And we try to keep them fed evenly, but I noticed this one, you can see the worms just crawling away right there. Look at that. So this bin is just going crazy right now. So you'll notice when you have a good balance, the amount of worms just really, they go nuts. So if they get too hot, they get too dry, certain foods that go in here kind of, they don't like it as much. Then they'll start competing with other types of worms. Look at that. Look at that. Look how many worms there are right there. So our bins, you'll notice them go through cycles. The more love we give them, the more consistent we feed them, the better food that we give them. They love these greens, but if I chop them up, they'll love it. They'll be able to eat them even quicker. But you can see this bin right here is just going nuts. And look, they're all trying to get into this trap that I made to make harvesting easier. They're all kind of working their way up through like the profile, through the layers of food that we've had in here, and it's breaking down. And so hopefully we can get in here soon and harvest this. But look at these worms. Look at that. The worm bin is going crazy. And so if you have a lot of numbers, that's always a good indication that you're doing well. If you see them mating and breeding, and you see the egg cases, that's always a great indication as well that that you have a healthy system. But look at that. Isn't that incredible? And so for us, it's just a great way to make some fertilizer, make some compost, some soil amendment that will really improve the quality of our produce, both nutritionally for us to eat that, but also just for the plants to grow robustly and healthfully. So I highly recommend worm composting if you can. Like I said, I just built these with just some old wood, and I've noticed that for our climate here where I'm at, it gets really hot in the summer. It's cool and windy right now and a little rainy, but our summers get extremely hot. So if you can put your worm bins somewhere shady, somewhere cool, or make sure they're basically sheltered in a bin that's at least keeps them warm, or keeps them, I'm not warm, I say warm, but keeps them insulated. So it's cool when it's hot. It's a little bit, more moderate when it gets really cold outside. If you live somewhere that has really, freezing winters, you want to make sure you give them a chance. And so having enough bedding in there, whether it's shredded cardboard, soaked cardboard, or newspaper is a fantastic material as well for them. But just good old kitchen scraps, garden scraps, chop them up. Like I said, that's the one thing I need to do better is actually have the kids chop them up really, really well before we put it in. I've seen some people blend it with a blender. You don't necessarily need to do that if you don't want to get your blender all funky or have an old blender to use, but just chop it up. The more you chop this material up and then lay it in there, the worms are going to love it. Keep a proper balance of moisture. There always needs to be moisture in these bins. If they dry out too much, then the worms, you notice that just they're moist. They're just wet little creatures, and so they need that moisture as well. Sometimes if I notice it's dry in here, we have a rain coming, I'll just leave these open for a day or two and let that rain come in. If not, we can add wet material. Like I said, soaking the cardboard is fantastic. Adding wet newspaper is also good. Now, if you don't have drainage, that can be a problem too. So the bottom of these are actually hardware cloth. Let me show you. So the bottoms of our worm bin are actually made of this material, right? Just metal mesh, and that just helps the water and air to move through. Now, if you're losing soil out the bottom, you can either get a lot of layers of cardboard to start, or I'd actually recommend just getting some landscape fabric that also drains, and then you can pin that layer in as well. Hold that in with that fabric, that metal mesh, and then you can have 2 layers that help one to hold in all the dirt material and keep the worms in, and then one to just let the water and air just flow through, because that's what you want. They need water, they need moisture, they need air, but they also want to be in darkness. They don't like the light, so keep them dark, keep them protected and shady. But I'm telling you, it is so worth the effort, because literally I'm just putting stuff in here. I don't have to chop and flip it like as I do our outdoor hot compost pile. That takes a little more physical effort, but this, I'm telling you, it just works so great. And I hope you're considering it as well. And I hope you have a great day and a great weekend, and just keep on gardening. I just wanted to share how our worms were doing and how we did it. You can see we basically built it with scrap. Even this is scrap pieces. In a way, if you got fresh wood, that's good too. But this was some old beds, some planter beds that were just going to be destined for the trash heap, and we're like, no, and they ended up being far superior to our plastic ones. You can see I even have the Worm Factory 5000 here or whatever, and it works good too. It works really good, but in comparison, these ones that are they're far superior. There's more space. I've got water hooked to them. The drainage is good, and the insulation factor is so much better. The plastic is great, but for our climate here, if you leave that out in the sun, you'll come back to worms that look like French fries, where there's crispy and fried. So you don't want any part of that. I'm telling you, the wood is the way to go if you want a larger system. But you could totally be creative. So I wish you the very best. And if you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear from our viewers. How are you doing with your worms? What you figured out. And you can see here, I created a gap underneath them that lets just the air and light kind of flow through. I've noticed when my bins are directly on the ground, the worms like to just go right out the bottom and kind of find greener pastures, so to speak. You can have that right on the ground and let that they just kind of leach into the soil. That's a possibility, but our wood here would just decay a little quicker. So we have a little gap there, and for us that's really helped. But as I mentioned, if you have any suggestions, I would love to hear what you're doing. If you have your own tips, I'm here to learn as much as I am to share what I'm doing. So just please teach me the ways. I'd love to learn from all of you. But until then, garden friends, happy gardening to you all. Please never stop growing, and get out in that garden. Go have some fun. We'll see you next time.